life shine. You gotta be working to get the woman and the wine. Keep the beat and get your hands in the air. Shuffle it quick 'cause it's an African affair. To Buffalo Park and our home at St. George's, we're bringing the silverware back on the border. That's the way of the warrior. That's the way of the warrior. That's the way of the warrior. That's the everyday warrior.
It's time indeed, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Firing on All Cylinders with myself and Mike tonight. Of course, Mike pops in every now and again for a little bit of a chat to his favourites, either sports people or whoever else. And I've got the gloves and everything sorted tonight. Does it look right? Does something look?
It looks a bit wrong.
Something looks a little bit wrong. Okay, I understand that. But we've got Trevor Quirk on tonight, of course. So we're going to have a great time.
What an honour and a privilege. I mean, you know, I was thinking about him in the build-up to the show, and it's funny. You tend to only really miss something when it's gone.
Yeah.
And it was so nice to hear his voice, as always. I mean, it's an iconic voice. He entertained South Africans for I think over a period of 3 decades.
Yeah.
And I mean,
incredible,
I've got to know him well, and it's really lovely to have him on. So.
It's really I think it's quite a scoop for us to have someone like Trevor on. He's been in everybody's lounges for the last I don't know how many years. But first of all, we've got to thank our sponsors. Thank you to Spa. Thank you, Spa. I'm going to use my right hand, my left right hand, or my right hand. Thank you to Spa, and thank you to of course our sponsors, Mobia, for our internet, which is always giving a solid internet connection. And then we've got Fitch and Leeds as well, who's going to give away a prize at the end of the night, as well as we can send one to our guest Trevor. If he gives us his address, we don't know whether he gives that out freely or not. Especially to Eastern Cape, Lower Albany people. We'll see how it goes.
And thank you to Gary for the supply of
indeed
cold lemonades, as Quirky calls them.
Well, I'm going to take my right
tasting very nice.
I've got my little Fitch and Leeds here. Cheers to you.
Cheers, old chap.
And I hope that Trevor Quirk has got something to drink, because we're going to bring him in right now, babies.
The show. Now it's your turn to shine. We're gonna have a lekker chat tonight. Another good time.
Trevor Quirk, welcome to our studio.
I must
wonderful to have you.
Got something to keep me company.
Excellent.
And,
have you gone off these, Quirky?
To see you, Gino, and Mike, or Fires as I know him. And,
Thank you, Quirky.
I think you, Gino, need a little bit more than the batting gloves, you know. I think a helmet would do.
When Fires is in the house, indeed.
No.
Especially when Fires is around.
Yeah.
Quirky, it's wonderful to see you, and thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure, absolute pleasure to be with you guys.
It's great to hear that voice again. And, you know, as I said to Gino in the build-up, you only really miss it when it's gone.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that iconic voice of yours, great to have you on the show. Thank you for your time, Quirky.
Well, old and retired now, you see.
The voice hasn't changed, though.
It still sounds good.
It's not changed too much. Maybe a little bit huskier than it used to be. You know, that's old age creeping in.
I would have thought that by giving a bit of a rest, you might get a bit of a second wind on the voice. You know what I mean?
Well, it's the most amazing thing. The other day I did have a few polyps on my vocal cords, like my good friend Robin Jackman. Sadly, his were malignant, and the same surgeon removed mine, and they were benign. So that was an absolute bonus. But it all resulted because I felt that my voice was getting a little bit husky. and I was a bit worried about it. And so this only took place in mid-December. So I'm still sort of, he says it will eventually completely restore itself. And the most amazing thing he told me is that your vocal cords are actually, it's a muscle, and it has to be exercised. I'm sure you don't talk much to your wife anymore. We all do.
I noticed you glanced to the right there.
Exactly. But he said, if necessary, I know when you go out with your mates on a long lunch or something that you will talk, but he said otherwise, sit on the stoop and read the newspaper loud to yourself.
Oh my word! Yeah,
brilliant.
Well, Quirky, the voice hasn't changed, and I must say, we were actually saying, Gino and I were talking earlier, along with Gary. You're actually looking very well for a 52-year-old.
Yeah.
I wish to be 50, but closer to 76 these days, And,
yes.
But yeah, I'm well otherwise, and
good.
I'm not a great. I've never seen the inside of a gym in my whole life. Have no intention.
You're a bad example.
Well, I don't care. I thrive on other things, and I play my golf, and that's about my only real exercise these days, and enjoy that immensely. But there's no need to run around the block and all that sort of nonsense. I've never chased my feet around anything.
We've got a couple of comments are coming on here, Trevor, for you to have a look at. It's Davey Howell saying, "Quirk, good to see you. All your appealing years ago."
Remember Davey Howell? Yes.
We got Camilla saying, "Can't agree more. Miss your voice, Trevor," she says.
Excuse me.
One thing that I miss the good old days of broadcasting. I mean, it was an absolute passion. And when I started broadcasting at the age of 23, that's a hell of a long time ago.
Yeah.
And, it's just totally in my blood, and not to do any of it anymore. I understand we all get to a point where we passed our sell-by date, but I must say that I really do miss it, and it's still great to speak at dinners sometimes, and to do charity golf days and all those sort of things. I still meet a lot of people, and many people say to me, "Oh, the voice." And I say, I don't understand what's so distinctive about my voice. I mean, yes, the great Charles Wolf, he was awful and so on, but I'm just an ordinary old South African born in Naboomspruit, and happened to
we were going to ask you about that.
Rather proper. So fortunately, if my father had sent me to Naboomspruit Primera School, I might have spoken a little differently and never become an English radio broadcaster.
Where did you actually go to school then, Trevor?
Well, I went to Waterkloof House Preparatory School. Delightful, wonderful private primary school in Pretoria as a boarder from the age of 5.5. And then I went on to Pretoria Boys High, and that's where I matriculated. And so I had only my holidays back on the farm, so I spoke a little bit differently to what I would have if I'd have gone to Naboomspruit.
Yes.
And tell me, just as a matter of interest, what did your dad farm?
My father farmed. He was Irish, of course, and he came out to South Africa. Loved the country so much, farmed in Ireland, and came back and told my dear mother that we're going to South Africa. And he bought this farm just outside Naboomspruit, and that's where I was born and grew up. And fortunately, as I say, he sent me to boarding school in Pretoria.
Gee, so both of your folks from Ireland, you would have thought that you'd have a little bit of a Martin Bailey going on there or something.
Indeed. Unfortunately, I do have an Irish passport, so that makes travel around the world very easy because I think the Irish passport is the best passport in the world. You can go anywhere without having to have visas and all that sort of thing.
Because they're always lost, isn't it?
and it's a wonderful, wonderful place. I took my dear wife there, who has a British passport. Not that she was born in England, she was born in Cape Town, but the thing about it is that she'd never been to Ireland, which I found extraordinary. And so I took her on a wee trip of Ireland, and we just had wonderful weather, which is unusual. And it's just amazing how friendly the people are, how delightfully tasteful the Guinness is.
Very much so. I didn't think you'd miss that one.
Yeah.
No, and that's for sure.
But you didn't. You're not one of those children who, when you spoke to your parents, you'd speak in your Irish accent, but when you speak to your mates, then you're back to your South African feel.
Not really, I don't know what sort of accent I had when I arrived at boarding school at Whips, but I began to round my vowels a little more there, and I don't know that it ever rubbed off on my parents, but that's just the way things develop.
Yeah.
And school-wise, were you always interested in sport? Did you excel at sport? How were you? Enjoy school? Were you a social person?
Well, it's quite amazing, that my mother was quite insistent that I take piano lessons at primary school, and so I started piano lessons, and then to my absolute horror, they clashed with cricket. So I gave up the piano lessons to concentrate on cricket. And I remember I was quite lucky in a way in that when I was in standard 3, as it was in those days, quite young still, the first team wicketkeeper, who was actually in standard 6, he broke a finger. And so the coach put us all through exercise of keeping wicket. And he selected me to become the new wicketkeeper at a very tender age. And, well, I've never done anything but keep wicket since standard 3. And, thank goodness he found something in me that has helped me along a lot in my cricket career. And obviously playing cricket was important, I think, in terms of getting recognition when I started broadcasting. So you played, obviously then played first team cricket then. You were pretty young, and then did you play club cricket after that? And is that how you got into the whole? Well, obviously when I went to Pretoria Boys High School, I was in the under 14A team, and again, it was the most amazing thing that the wicketkeeper in the first team was caught playing soccer. Now, at Pretoria Boys High, you were not allowed to play soccer anywhere. And if you did, you were in danger of being expelled at that time.
What?
And so he was dropped from the cricket side and fortunately not expelled. But they moved me up from under 14A to the first team because they didn't feel the, second and third team and fourth team wicketkeepers were any good. So, and they took me on a tour in September, which we did annually to play against Maritzburg High, Hilton, Michael House, Durban High.
Wow.
It was an annual tour. And there I was, I couldn't see over the stumps, so I had to peer around them. And, I was a tiny little bloke, batted number 11. And, but what an experience that was. I grew up very, very quickly, especially on the train journey when the prefects collared me and said, "Now you stick with us because you don't want to be with the baddies. And the baddies got hold of me and said, "You stick with us, and we'll teach you about things." Needless to say, I sided with the baddies.
But now, Quirky, didn't the Wigglies go to Pretoria Boys High?
Who?
The Wiggly brothers, those great footballers that played for Arcadia.
The Wiggly brothers, they all went to Pretoria Boys High, and of course, I became a very big Arcadia Shepherds football fan.
Very much so.
The Wigglies played for Arcadia Shepherds, and when I was left school and I was now allowed to play football because I actually went and played at Arcadia Shepherds in the under 18 side and under 19 side, and the Wigglies of course became famous there, but they were a bit above me, but of course I commentated more on soccer to begin with than on any other sport.
I was going to ask you about that.
I was doing radio, obviously, commentary in those days, well before television. And I remember the cup final at the Rand Stadium and Stephen Wiggly on the wing, and and then he went overseas, of course, to America to play for the Tampa Bay Rowdies or whatever they were called. And Jeff Wiggly followed. And so, I knew them very well as a family, and they were a great sporting family because particularly Jeff and they played first team rugby as well. So they were very good all-round sportsmen.
Yes.
I see Bobby Cameron say that he would have been expelled as well if you see, obviously, soccer players here.
No. But Bobby Cameron is a Scot who came to Port Elizabeth and became a Springbok soccer player and possibly played with the Wigglies.
All right.
Oh, we've got your great mate.
We can ask him. He's online at the moment. So, Bobby, tell us what you know about the Wigglies. And then the Wash, a good mate and a jolly fine fellow, hates lemonade or five. Whilst
Malcolm Melly Berenzi.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, well, he's not incorrect about hating lemonades. I'm rather partial to that and have always been. And I might tell you, on that fateful train journey down to Natal to play as a young boy, the baddies that I did side with introduced me in a big way to a few lemonades.
I'm sure they did. We were wondering where you developed the thirst.
Yes.
But
I just see there is a comment about the old NFL there, Zaire Musa, saying there that he's commentated in the old is it National Football League. Is that
yes?
And
yes, that's exactly right. The good old days, and
it's there. Is that it?
I did a tremendous amount of soccer commentary, all over the country. In fact, I was so lucky because I got flown down to Cape Town every Friday to do football on a Friday night here. And the one Friday night, it was at Hartleyvale, Cape Town City. And the next Friday was at Greenpoint. Now, when I was doing Hartleyvale, Cape Town City, Budgie Byrne was my expert opinion. And he was the manager of the Hellenic. And then the next week when I did Hellenic, then Roy Bailey, who was the manager of Cape Town City, was my expert opinion. And the great young Bailey, Gary Bailey, the goalkeeper,
Gary Bailey,
actually grew up in my commentary box. From a little boy, I watched him grow up. And he always came and sat in the back or stood in the back of the commentary box. And and even when the great Bailey died, Roy Bailey, I actually was asked by Gary to do the eulogy at his funeral. So, we became very good mates.
But now, Quirky, if I may ask you, there's a story attached to your arrival in the world of commentating. Won't you please share that story with us? And I seem to recall you walked into the SABC and demanded a job.
This ambition from when I was about 13 years old, And I was, at boarding school, Solomon House at Pretoria Boys High. And I used to drive my mates absolutely crazy because on those wonderful little cricket test matches that you had on the front lawn of the boarding house, I used to do commentary constantly. And I'd take off Charles Fortune, then I'd switch to Andy McGilwray, the great Australian commentator, and then to John Arlott, the great English commentator, Brian Johnston, and I mimicked them all. And then I had the courage when I was in Standard 7 to write to Charles Fortune. And I said, "Dear Mr. Fortune, basically it was a naive little letter. One day I want to be like you." And he wrote me back the most discouraging letter where he said, "Oh no, there's no commentator in the world under the age of 30 and you need to educate yourself, particularly in English, if that's, you must travel the world and preferably play cricket at a decent level and all those sort of things." And I thought, oh, well, I'll never crack that. So I said to my dear dad, we better go and register. I'm going to do law instead. And I'll become this great advocate, standing up in court and pontificating. And he took me in to Johannesburg from the farm, and I registered to do law at Wits University. And I said, "But Dad, seeing we've come all this way, we're in Johannesburg, just take me down to the SABC. I'd love to go down there and just have a chat to them." And he did. And I walked in and I said, "I'd like to speak to somebody about working here." So now I'm just out of school. And they said, no, you've got to make an appointment. And I gave them the sad story. I've come all the way from the farm. Anyway, they phoned up human resources, and amazingly, they agreed to see me there and then. And they did an interview with me, and they put me through an aptitude test. And they said, "Okay, would you like to start as what they called a presentation assistant, working with the announcers in April next year?" And I said, "Absolutely." And I went downstairs and I said to my dad, "I'm starting here at the SABC on the 1st
Stuff the law.
And he said, "No, you're not. You will go to university first." And when I got home to the farm, my mother gave me hell and she said, "You will go to university." I said, no, I promise you, I'll do my degree through UNISA. But I'm going to the SABC. And that's how I started. Wow. And then, of course, I did study at UNISA. And then I did the announcers audition. And Kim Shippey, amazingly, was the man who put me through the audition. It was a very complicated affair. You had to read the news, present a symphony concert, do all sorts of things, read poetry, Shakespeare, all that. And I passed the audition, and I became a general announcer on the English radio service, reading news, presenting concerts, all those sort of things. But obviously, I was going to graduate into sport, although at the time I was playing Currie Cup cricket at the same time. So it was, difficult to broadcast on cricket and that when you play. But as Fires knows, we only played about 5 Currie Cup games a season. So I would play against Eastern Province one weekend, and the next weekend I'd be commentating on Eastern Province versus Western Province. It was sort of
it's funny you say that. It's funny you say that because I wondered about that today.
Yeah.
I mean, you used to commentate on a lot of our games, and I used to want to know, why aren't you playing? Because we would play against you in the next...
It was amazing, and it was great in a way because obviously I knew you guys very well because I played against you. But I don't know that it was quite the right thing to be having to, say, criticize one of the guys that you play against, especially a fast bowler like Fires,
You got to call it as you see it.
When there's so many things to criticize.
been subjected to a few bounces or two.
Which would have looked away for four.
Well, I see. Malcolm says Washi's the master of English, but of English pontification. He says.
No, very true.
Even in the pub.
Yeah, pontification. I'm not so sure about that, because I don't lecture like one or two commentators that I think shall remain nameless at the moment do pontificate. And they're giving you a continuous lecture on, the game and what they think should be done and how the guy should bowl and how the captain should do this and how I don't think I was ever quite guilty of that. I tried more to describe or create a picture, especially in the radio days, where I started, of course.
Yeah.
And the great Charles Fortune, who was my mentor and tutor, no doubt about it. I mean, I worship.
So when you went in, so even post his horrible letter.
Yes, that's the amazing thing,
Correct.
After telling me that there was no commentator in the world under the age of 30 that was doing cricket, I ended up actually commentating with him at the Wanderers at Kim Shippey's behest. Kim was head of radio sport in those days, no television yet. And I was working with the great Charles Fortune. I never slept the night before. I was so nervous.
I was going to ask you about that, Quirky.
Yeah. The next morning.
Sorry. Yeah. No, I beg your pardon. Carry on, Quirky.
The next morning, we were in the commentary box, and in those days, the public used to send you telegrams, which were delivered into the commentary box by the post office. Wow. And of course, Charles Fortune is the senior commentator. He went through them. Most of them went into file 13, but he'd select one or two that he would talk about. And then the old bullet, he put one aside, and when he went off to the gents, I took a peek look at it. And when he came back, I said, no, Mr. Fortune, I have to confess, I had a little look at that telegram you pushed aside, and I would very much like to read it out. Oh, do what you will, Trev, he said. And so I did. And the amazing thing is it came from a blind home. And all it said was, dear Mr. Fortune, when you are on the air, we see. Now, I don't think any radio commentator could be paid a greater compliment than that. Because he painted these pictures for
hence what you said earlier,
blind people. So whatever happened, whether it was the lady in the pink hat or the minor birds, and yes, he forgot to give the score for about 4 overs or something, whatever, he created a picture that I aspired to do. And so, he was without a doubt my mentor and my tutor.
Wow.
And Quirky, what sort of era are you talking about here? That famous walk into SABC, for instance, where you said, I would like to work here.
I matriculated in 65, so I went to fight the war in 1966.
Thank you. That's why we're all here.
And then, so we're talking now about 1968. I joined the SABC full time.
As long as,
And by 1972, 73, I started commentating. Well, I started broadcasting first on English radio, and then I actually got to start commentating on sport.
And at that stage, I would assume you didn't know many of the players, or did you?
No, but as I say, I did a tremendous amount of football in those days, soccer.
Yes.
And again, what you do, and you train your mind eventually that you obviously see a number and it immediately tells you that it's whoever it is. because you're not sure, especially when you're doing soccer, whether you will see the number of the guy. So you eventually learn little things about him. Teenage Gladler was a skinny little bloke and running on the left wing, and Ace in Selengwe was this, that. And so I could see them and immediately identify who they were. So it's something you train your mind to. It's like in rugby, and I did a lot of rugby. Eventually, you can't see what's going on half the time because guys are buried in the scrum under the bodies and all that. But you learn to identify people by little things. Their hair, the way they walk, the way they run. I used to do like, this guy had yellow stripes on his boots, that guy had white stripes on. There were little things, identification things, that you learn to do as you progress as a commentator. And so, those early days were incredibly interesting and intuitive to me. And, I just built on that as the years went by.
I see that there's one or two comments coming. I don't want to fall behind too much with the comments because I see a Garth Webster, another soccer player here, and cricketer. You'd love to hear the story about Quirky and Jackers, which involves, I think, a bike in the east. Is that doable, Trevor?
The amazing thing about Robin Jackman is that I met him when I played for Northern Transvaal in a Currie Cup game against Rhodesia. And that was, in fact, my first ever Currie Cup game. And Jackers was playing for Rhodesia in those days, and so was Mike Proctor. Now, I'd played against Mike Proctor at Nuffield at school level. He was a year ahead of me, very fast then, even faster when I played against him, for Rhodesia. And I remember that my very first game, it was incredible how Mike Proctor knocked the opening batsman's off stump out of the ground. And I was padded up and had to go in. So my first game, I hadn't had a lot of time to sit in the change room and worry and get nervous. I was out there. And I walked out and I was taking guard, and Ray Gripper was the captain of Rhodesia in those days. He was at forward short leg. And the great Springbok leg spinner, Jackie du Preez, was at backward short leg.
Great name.
Gripper said to Jackie du Preez, "Who's this little Wally?" And he actually used a more derogatory word than that, but and du Preez said, "I know some little oak called Quirk." So Gripper said, while I was taking guard, "Why are his legs shaking?" And my legs were not shaking at that time. Then I looked up at the sight screen, and there was Mike Proctor waiting to come off his long run. I'd spent 2 weeks being thrown a ball at me from 16 meters where I had to duck inside his famous bouncer. Because I was inclined to sway out of the way. And they said, "You do that and Procky's bouncer will follow you." So I learned now to get inside it. But in the panic, because of being thrust in so quickly and also with these chirps being made, when he bowled me the bouncer 2 balls later, I swayed out of the way. I went back to old habits, in other words. No helmets in those days. Hit the peak of my cap, rearranged it on my head, and I fell down on my backside in my crease. And as I was clumsily picking myself up, everybody around was laughing, the slips and the short legs and whatever. And I looked up and Procky was 3 yards away from me, and he said, "Oopsie daisy. Next time, effing his head off, you little," and I won't say what he said there. So that was my little introduction. But in that same match, I came across Jackers, and afterwards in the change room and that evening in the pub, we hit it off immediately.
My word.
Wow.
And when he
Fantastic.
eventually stopped commentating, stopped playing, he coached Western Province. He came down to Cape Town from Rhodesia. And then when he stopped coaching, I suggested to him that maybe he might like to try his hand at commentating, which he did. Yeah. And I think it was an instant success. He had a tremendous knowledge of the game and such a likeable way on air and all that.
Wonderful.
And of course, we ended up absolutely touring the country and the world as commentator colleagues together. And yes, the bicycle story. So we were in India.
For Garth Webster.
And we were due to fly from Delhi to Calcutta. And our flight was delayed by some 7 or 8 hours. Now, in an Indian domestic airport, there are no pubs. You daren't even have a cup of coffee because the milk might just, set you off. So you're awfully careful about how things go. So somehow I talked our way into the business class lounge. And I walked in and there was this fridge. And I said to Fox, Silver Fox as we called him, Jackets, look, a fridge. And I opened the fridge. There wasn't even a pint of milk in there. There was nothing. So I went inquiring, and I said, now, to various people, where will we find the closest pub? Because, we can't sit here for 7, 8 hours doing nothing. So the guy said, no, what you must do is you must go to international departures. There's a pub there. So we got a tuk-tuk and off we went. And we spent some considerable time in that pub. And when we came out, to our absolute astonishment, there were no tuk-tuks, there was no taxis, there was no bus, there was no shuttle service back to domestic, there was nothing. So I said, well, my dear Jackers, we're going to have to walk back to the domestic departures, which was about 2 kilometers. And we set off, and I saw this man, this wallah, with a bicycle. And I said to him, my good man, because that's how they always addressed you in India, my good man.
Yes,
I said, my good man, would you like to sell me your bicycle? Oh, and he wobbled his head and he said to me, okay, how much you pay? So I said, 200 rupees. Oh, yes, okay. Now, 200 rupees was nothing in terms of rands. Yeah. And he parted with his bicycle. So I got on the bicycle and I said to Jackers, sit on the back, like when you used to go to school or the day boys used to come to school, they used to have that little thing on the back of their bicycles where you put the sandwiches the mother had given you or whatever.
The carrier.
And I said to him, well, you get on there and off we'll go. Anyway, I couldn't make the bicycle move. It was so old and ancient. And with Jackers sitting on the back was a major problem. So he said, no, Quirky. Now, remember, we've had a few thousand lemonades at this stage. And he said, well, no, I'll do the riding. But what I'll do is I'll get up some speed and then you run alongside. And when I say jump, you jump on the little saddle thing behind. So this is exactly what happened. But of course, as I jumped onto the back, and I'd given up playing serious sport at that stage, so I'd put on a kilo or 3, and I jumped on the back, and the back tire burst, and we crashed to the ground. Clumsily picked ourselves up, and there was the Waller standing, his arms folded, and he wasn't laughing out loud, but he was shaking with mirth. And he got his bicycle back.
Oh, yeah.
And
200 rupees.
Enough money in his pocket to repair the burst tire.
Excellent.
And then we started walking. And when you in India and you're on television in particular, you become a household name and face because cricket is a religion to them. They're fanatical about it.
Yes.
And this bus stopped, you know, those painted buses, the front is all painted and decorated. And this man stopped alongside us and he said, "Oh, Mr. Jackman, Mr. Quirk, where are you going?" So I said, "We're going to international, domestic departures." "Oh," he says, "jump aboard, jump aboard." We got onto this bus. Well, we were nearly overcome by the incense on the bus. But we made it on time for our flight.
Excellent. Lovely.
But, Quirky, tell us the story, because what was flashing through my mind there, and I know you and Jackers were very close, and we should actually have a cheers to absent friends. But I don't have a beer at the moment. But
I'm sure Gary can organise while we are.
What I'd like you to tell the viewers is a story you once told us about you and Jeff Boycott when he came to play, I think, club cricket in Pretoria, was it not?
Yeah, the great Jeffrey Boycott came to play for my Pretoria High School Old Boys, which I was captain of. And, you know, Jeffrey was a different sort of human being, shall I put it that way. And the very first game, we were playing against Witbank in a first league game. And it was arranged that I should pick him up. So I did at the house he was staying at, which was with our chairman of Pretoria High School Old Boys Cricket Club. And he was standing outside with his great MCC trunk, all in his whites already, even though we had 70, 80 kilometers to go still. And he berated me immediately for being late. Now, I'd got to bed at about 4 o'clock the night before, after a little party. And then I stopped at the doll's house to pick up one or two of the other boys, which set him off again. And then, to his absolute horror, I stopped in Bronkhorstspruit, because by then our tongues were like rasps and we needed some sort of refreshment. So we stopped to buy a few Cokes, and he went absolutely ballistic again because he said, "You're late." And now anyway, we got to Witbank in good time, and we sort of sat around, and he came out with his pads on, back gloves, everything. And he said, "Come on, Captain, I want net." I said, no, Jeffrey, you don't understand. There'll be no net before we go out there to play. And then on a beautiful wicket, I won the toss and I elected to field. And he went ape again. He said, "How can you win the toss on a beautiful batting wicket like this and field?" I said, "Jeffrey, you don't understand. Witbank, not a very good side. So what will happen is we'll bowl them out for under 100. We'll make 300. Then we'll bowl them out for under 100 again. We get maximum points." Yes. He wasn't happy. So we duly bowled them out for 90 odd. And then we went out. I said, "I want runs quickly." Yeah. Anyway, of course, typical Jeffrey Boycott, stonewalling, he'd steal a single off the last ball. Totally not. Correct. And I was going absolutely ape. When I got out and batted, I went into number 3 now out of the club. And I said to him, "Jeffrey, I said to you, I want you to get on with it." And he blocked again and blocked. And I went down and said, "If you don't start playing some shots, I'm going to run you out." And he said, "Do you know who I am?" I said, "Yes, I know who you are, but it doesn't matter. You either get on with it or I run you out." And then he started playing the most wonderful array of shots, which he could do. So we had 2 years of this, and it was a very strained relationship, during which time he obviously got picked for Northern Transvaal, so we played together for Northern Transvaal. And it wasn't an easy thing. He threatened at the end of the first season never to come back, but he did come back. And we continued to have many a little situation one way or another, dear Jeffrey. And we chose Jackers and I chose the meanest cricketers in the world, 11. So the guys with very deep pockets and very short arms. Okay. And there wasn't a hesitation, because obviously Jackers played a lot against Jeffrey when he was playing for Surrey, and Jeffrey for Yorkshire. Yes. And we were unanimous in Jeffrey Boycott opened the bat.
More than a lot he was.
The story that I vaguely recalled was when you got shat on by Jeffrey Boycott for getting to bed at 4 o'clock. You got 100 and he got a 0.
Well, this was yes, I know. And years later, he invited me to Headingley, where his home ground, where an Ashes test between Australia and England. And obviously he told me I had to dress up in jacket and tie, which I did. And then I had lunch, with the committee and the chairman and all this sort of thing. And being a guest, he had to introduce me to the whole mob at lunch. And he said, "This is my captain, Trevor Quirk. Finest captain I've ever played under." He said, "I used to come to ground, and there he was, lying under rubber mats, drunk as a skunk. And then he'd go out and make 100. And
that wonderful accent.
The story of how from my night under the shower mats, because it was too late to bother to go back home from the club. He went out, made a duck, and I went in and made 100. So we had some amazing times.
Well, we can cheers that and cheers to absent friends. If you want to do that now, you got your glass.
I've got yeah. Thank you,
cheers.
Gino. Cheers to absent friends. Cheers to Jackers.
Yes, absolutely.
What a great man, Quirky. I know you guys were inseparable, and what a really lovely guy.
And we've got some
inseparable. And, it's 2 years now that he's gone. He died on Christmas Day 2 years ago, and Jackers and I played a lot of golf together. He was always my partner. We always shared a golf cart together. We went to at least 2, sometimes 3 long lunches a week. We were both members of Iniquitous Olympics Club.
Correct.
It's the only male-only club left in South Africa where we have no women members, and they're not allowed to enter the premises. So it's a terribly chauvinistic place. But Jackers spent even more time than I did there, because he lived down the road virtually. But we had many, many wonderful times together. And I miss him very dearly.
I'm sure you do. And he was a fantastic cricketer as well. Jackers, Quirky, you guys came to do a show at Old Grey way back in about 2012 or 2013. And what amazed me about him was the fact, and I still made mention of it that evening, when you look at players' first-class records today, bowlers are not measured in overs anymore. They're measured in balls bowled. And the average guy has bowled around 12 to maybe 15,000 balls in a 10-year span. Jackers, if I recall, was 85,000 balls.
Jesus.
I mean, that's a hell of a lot of cricket.
Because, my maths is not very good, but I know he bowled something like 14,000 overs. Now,
that would be right.
Forget about net practices and club games.
Exactly.
Because in those days, as you know, as a first-class cricketer, you played in club matches. And so heaven knows how many times he ran around the world, quite frankly. And
Absolutely.
he had a very long run for, as I always used to say to him, Jackers, I think you ran faster than you delivered the ball.
No, but you say that. There was a time when he was quite sharp. And I can remember sitting next to one of your great old mates, Sid Levy, for a purple 5 today, going back to about 73, in the commentary box at St. George's, scoring. And I can remember seeing Jackers there for the first time, and he was nifty.
Yeah, obviously I like to belittle him, but he
I'm
could be
sure.
quite, because he was short, so he skidded
Yes.
off
Yes.
the pitch like that Mosley. You remember Ezra Mosley?
Very, very well.
Came out on the Rebel Tour.
Very well, Quirky.
Graham
Very
Pollock
well.
still says to me that he was the fastest bowler he ever faced, because he went like that off the wicket.
He was
And,
very
He
quick.
was
Yeah.
EP guy, yeah.
did very much the same. And he was one of those players that he was a vociferous appealer.
Correct.
I mean, and then I've never seen anybody more aggrieved looking on his face when the decision went against him and he was turned. He was something else. But you talk about Sid Levy, and it was amazing how Kim Shippey said to me one day, he said, Sid Levy is getting old, and
Yes.
I am going to step him down from commentary. And
Yes.
I want you, and I was just a young commentator, to go to Port Elizabeth and do commentary in his place. So because Charles was doing the Wanderers and Berea Park, I went to Port Elizabeth virtually for every match that was played in PE in those days.
We know that well,
So
Quirky.
much so that I even had keys to the old grade club at one stage. And, I met so many great mates there and wonderful people that I enjoyed so much in Port Elizabeth. I mean, it has that mantle of being the friendly city. And believe me, I considered it to be that. And I had a whale of a time there. And I remember the first time I walked into the commentary box and Sid Levy was standing there, jacket and tie, the old Penguins tie and
The
blazer.
embassy cigarettes.
And he told the story afterwards. He said, and in walked this little upstart. And I thought to myself, good heavens, Sid Levy, what have you done in life that you now must be put out to pasture for this little whippersnapper?
Yes.
And then he says at the dinner that he was speaking at, which I happened to be at, he said, and then the boy opened his mouth behind the microphone and he said, I knew my job had gone forever, which
They loved you dearly.
From old
He
Sid.
loved you dearly. But
Yes.
didn't you guys?
So much so that he then invited me. Well, I was actually doing a game between Eastern Province and Rhodesia. And on the Sundays, Fires in those days, we weren't allowed to play on Sundays.
Correct.
So,
But we could
on
drink.
a Sunday, we went and played golf.
We could drink on a Sunday, but you couldn't play cricket.
Vuuren, and I was playing with Mike Proctor and Jackers, and afterwards we walked into the pub and Sid was there. And as I walked in, and so was Peter Pollock, who happened to be captain of Penguins at the time. He obviously finished playing, first class, top class cricket. And Penguins are about to go on an overseas tour, and he walked in. When I walked in, he said to Peter Pollock, he said, there he is. We'll take Quirky as our wicketkeeper to England. And I said to him, you've been smoking something. I'm
going to come to that.
Anyway, he then explained to me that Ashton Galpin had pulled out of the tour, and they didn't really have a wicketkeeper. Young, I think his name was Richie Lyle or something. He was going to be like the young deputy keeper to Ashton.
Richard Late. Richie Late.
That's it,
Richard Late. Correct.
Anyway, so I said, I can't afford to go to England. He said, no, it costs you 600 Rand. We've raised a lot of money and it'll cost you 600 Rand and we're going for 4 weeks and you are coming. Well,
Yeah.
I went back to Kim Shippey and I said, I've had this wonderful invitation to go and play cricket in England. And I'd like to go. I'm prepared to take unpaid leave. Anyway,
Yes, sure.
Kim thought it was a very good thing for my image or whatever. Not that he realized I was only playing for Penguins. But
brand.
a wonderful tour. And I became a Penguin thereafter that went to Durban and Grahamstown and all sorts.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you. Didn't you do something to Sid Levy? I know he smoked a lot, but didn't you put something foreign in his cigarette or his pipe?
Well, yes.
Put a bit of marijuana in his pipe.
We were on a tour in Durban, and I had got home at about 6 in the morning with one or two other reprobates. I think young Simpson was one of them.
Quite correct.
And I think Rory Steer was the other.
100%.
And we got home and we were carrying our bags in from the day's match before. And Sid Levy thought that we were up already. And he said, Quirky, I can't believe that you are up so early. I said, well, no, got a game. And it was out in Umzinto or somewhere that we had to play. And, of course,
You're
we
making
only
me
then
cry.
went to bed. So then we overslept. And I was there in my car, the red fire engine.
Oh, God. I told you the story about the red fire engine. You're actually making me cry.
And of course, couldn't find the place. And I stopped and asked the man, where this place? And he said there. And I said to him, what is the town beyond that? And he said, I think it was Richmond or something. And so when we got to the ground, we were very late. And Sid was standing virtually in the car park, waiting. And as we got out, he said, where have you been? I said, don't you shout at me, Sid. Your instructions on how to get here are the worst I've ever come to. You've been to Richmond and back already. He said, well, whatever. Get the pads on immediately. You're already. I got the pads on. And another wicket fell, and out I went. And I ended up making 80-odd not out. And Simpson came in, and he made about 30. And Steer came in, and he made a few runs. And then I was banned from keeping because I was in such bad favor with Sid. And
he was a wonderful character.
Somebody else kept. And I was deposited down at fine leg. And Steer ended up taking 5 wickets. And between the three of us, we won the match. And I said,
you see,
and then the next game was in Durban. And we went there and it rained. And it rained and rained and rained. And so we had a few lemonades eventually, and then went down to the market in Durban, that market area, and bought a little of the Durban poison, as I used to say. And went back, and as you say, Sid used to chain smoke.
Yes.
So we stole a box of his cigarettes, and we eased out the tobacco, and we put in a few seeds. And then the cocktail party that evening, of course, was all the hoi polloi of the Natal cricket. The president was there, and everybody. It was the last match of the tour, and a big cocktail party, and everybody important was there. And we were having a jolly time. And Sid eventually said to me, it's amazing how he used to chastise me, and yet he would turn to me in moments of crisis.
Oh, no, he loved you. He loved you.
He said to me, Quirky, I'm feeling quite peculiar. I said, why? He said, I don't know. He said, but I'm feeling very, very the peculiar. So I said, well, have another scotch. No. He said,
And a cigarette.
And he had that huge big Chevrolet. And he said,
That's right.
I only have 2 drinks. And, I won't have another drink. So I said, well, then have another cigarette, Sid. And he lit up again. And the air was blue. And
that's right, the blue
he
smoke.
handed me the keys and he said, I am feeling so peculiar. You better drive.
No, listen, he loved you dearly. And in fact, there was that wonderful story where, if I remember clearly, you were the guest speaker at a Penguins dinner. And it was just after a tour that you had gone on overseas when Rob Lowe was unearthed. Do you remember that, Quirky?
Oh, yes. 1979 South African Barbarians tour.
Yeah, and you got up there and you said, we left the shores of South Africa with great arbitration. And a certain Brown Desfountain popped up. He said, what position did he play? Quirky had to answer to that. I've got so many fond memories of you, Quirky. But now, what I wanted to ask you as well, the transition from radio to television, was that difficult?
I didn't find it that difficult because when television started in 1976, Kim Shippey moved from radio as head of radio sport to head of television sport. And I took over as head of radio sport. So I continued to do radio commentary. But in the experiment to when they were practicing, to go on air for television, they got me to do a lot of the rugby commentary. And it didn't go on air, but, I was doing it. And I learned some of the disciplines then of television. You don't talk all the time. Obviously, you just identify, and your job is to inform and identify and so on. And so I didn't find, when eventually I started doing television cricket, I didn't find it that difficult to discipline myself and only talk about things around what you were seeing. So embellish the picture, in other words.
Yeah.
Yes, I
And
understand.
the incredible sadness was that when I took over as head of television sport in 1981 from Kim Shippey, Charles Fortune was desperate to become a television commentator. And so I had such high regard for him that I started to use him on television. And he was absolutely hopeless because, he could not get himself out of the radio format, as it were.
Painting the picture scenario.
Exactly. And when you're commentating on television, you've got earphones on, and the director is talking to you all the time, telling you that a slow-mo replay is coming up, or this is going to happen, or they're going to do. And Charles, of course, used to push the earphones because they distracted him. And so, they were showing the replay of a wicket that had fallen. And Charles was still talking about the lady in the pink hat down there.
Yes.
And, painting radio pictures, which was completely against the format of television. And sadly, I had to take him off the air, which was the most difficult thing I've ever had to do because he was my hero. But
did he accept it?
Never made the transition.
Yeah, well, that's why I asked you the question because, you're on radio, as you said earlier, you're painting this picture.
Yeah.
And now the picture's painted for you. It can't be easy.
Exactly.
But you did it well.
Yeah.
Well, you just have to inform around the picture, embellish, as I say, and then obviously listen to the director. And it takes a bit of time to become used to all the chatter that's going on because he's not only talking to you, he's talking to the cameraman as well.
Yes.
But then you learn that, camera 4 does this. So when he says, okay, camera 4, coming to camera 4, on camera 4, then you know what sort of picture's coming up. And you learn to cope with all this chatter in your ears while you are talking, which a lot of people can't do.
Can't be easy. Can't be easy.
Well, kudos to you for actually doing this, for getting him in as well, because I know he was obviously well loved by everybody, and so.
Very loved.
But you know, you've got to make those tough decisions sometimes as well. It must have been hectic for you to do.
Well, absolutely, but it's hard, you know, especially when he's been your mentor and your tutor.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
You know, it was a very difficult time for me to make those decisions, but you know, I had to do it because he just did not make the transition.
Yeah. This we've got a couple of questions coming through here and a couple of reminders for stories. Let's see. Keith Clark, he sometimes gives us some of this, but we've got very little left, Keith Clark. We need some more. Little bit of punters. Bit of Jerry. Get some.
So Quirky can see the comments. I forgot about that.
Yes.
Casey is a wonderful chap who's given us lots to enjoy over the years. Been in that industry for a hell of a long time. I've played some golf with old Casey. He's a great character. And the Grey Shark, you see, was a Nissan 380 ZX sports car.
Oh.
What happened is that
he just shot his beard through his.
I'm just showing you. You actually made me cry a little bit. You did not. Now I'm laughing. The beard's coming through my nose. Carry on. I beg your pardon. I know the story.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You know, remember we used to have the Gillette Cup, which was the first one-day competitions in South Africa.
You are a character. You are a character.
Shield. And it came down to 50 overs. And Nissan were huge sponsors of cricket in those days.
Yes.
And so I had a great affinity with them. And they found out that I was actually driving a Nissan in those days, which was the red fire engine. And and then they said to me, you know, what about you buying a 380 ZX sports car from us?
Ooh,
so I thought it was a wonderful idea, but I obviously couldn't afford it because they were fully
big discount
cars. Anyway, they gave me such a huge discount that I jumped at the opportunity, and I was earning a few more bob in those days, and so there I had this grey 380 ZX Nissan.
No.
And boy, could that thing travel. In fact, it was in miles, you know. So I remember coming down to Cape Town to get married, and I came down with my sister in the Grey Shark, and I had been driving most of the way, and she did question me as to how did we get to Bloemfontein so quickly. Anyway, we went on, and at about, I think it was Three Sisters or some place like that, narcolepsy started setting in. I said to her, listen, my dear sister Lynn, I can't drive anymore, I'm falling asleep. So she took over. Now, having berated me about driving so fast, which I did do and I still do, she took over, and within about a minute and a half, I said to her, have you looked at the speedometer? And she said, yes, I'm doing 100 kilometers an hour. I said, no, my darling, that's 100 miles an hour. And so there were many a people that I terrified in the Grey Shark. And then I had a white one after that. And so, yeah.
A couple of Nissans on the way there. You see, David Howell's also got something for us here. What is he talking about, Jay? He's got a long story.
Jesus, that's a book.
Natal and Northerns, very late on a Saturday afternoon. 9 wickets down. Vincent Proctor won an extra half an hour to finish the game off.
Sunday was an off day.
Oh, David. Okay. Yeah, well, that was...
Come back on Monday.
A wonderful occasion because obviously I had... met Proctor, and you know, Proctor was a fearsomely fast bowler, one of the fastest bowlers in the world, if not at the time. And but the lovely thing about him is that you would party late into the night with him.
A strong man.
You know, in those days we weren't paid too much, so we didn't take things too seriously. And partying and touring was more important than the cricket almost.
Yeah.
Proctor and I became very good friends. And then he came back from Rhodesia and he was playing for Natal. And you know, in those days when you played in fires, you would know, Natal had such a good bowling side with Vince van der Pijl and all that you couldn't distinguish between the pitch and the outfield. That's how green the pitch was. So we got caught on this, Northerns, and we were about to lose in 2 days. And I found out at tea on the second day that if we got bowled out that day, then we would fly home that night. The manager had been able to secure flights for us at about 7:30 that night. And so I said to my co-batsman, I said, listen, we are playing for, and if we didn't get that flight, we could only get another flight on the scheduled one, which was on the Tuesday morning. So I said, we're playing for 2 nights extra in Durban. Now, get your head down. And of course, Quirky came flying in off his long run, and I was blocking him. And he was tearing his hair, and he said, what are you trying to do? I said, Quirky, you know, this is the deal. So then he thought, no, he'll start bowling his off spinners, which he and of course, Tues was standing up, and then I knew that a bouncer was coming at some stage off the
that short run.
And of course, he bowled it. I was ready for it, and I swayed out of the way, but he hadn't told poor old Titch, and it hit him on the Adam apple, and down he went. And that wasted more time.
15 minutes, 20 minutes.
Eventually, we were 8 down, and they could claim the extra half hour.
Yeah.
And there was only a very ordinary batsman to come, and to my absolute astonishment, when the umpire said, right, you know, extra half hour if you would like to claim it. And Vince van der Pijl, who was captain, said, no, we've had enough for today.
I hope you gave him some money.
I got off the field long before any one of them, and I was already unpadded and everything else, and they could never have got me out of the change room again.
Vince a big guy.
That night, of course, we got absolutely out of our minds, having a wonderful time. And I met a gentleman at the Los Angeles Hotel, I remember, about midnight. And he said to me, this is disgraceful. I've been watching you, and you're having such a party, and you're not out overnight. So I said, so? He said, well, you won't last long in the morning. So I said to him, well, I don't know about that. So he said, I'll bet you a case of beer that you will not last tomorrow morning. So I had made an agreement with Proctor in the change room that, you know, just bowl one straight one tomorrow morning, and, you know, we've secured our extra day's holiday in Durban, and we'll be off to the Parkview Hotel, which is where I always used to go, the Natal
Probably
boys.
see Joe Parker.
And of course he came charging in, and I went, and he said, now what's going on, Quirky? I said, well, things have changed overnight. And he was furious. And he let me have it in no uncertain terms. But fortunately, the other 2 guys, they got out, and I was not out with 40 odd, and I'd survived 3 hours of this business. And Proctor said to me, what was going on? I said, well, I've just won a case of beer.
See, Ryan Jordan has got a question there as well. He says, I'll never forget when Hansie was set up to say, thanks, Trevor, you biscuit, after an interview.
Yeah, well, you know, dear old Hansie, we had quite a relationship in many ways. I got on extremely well with him because I respected him so much. Yes. I think he's arguably the best captain South Africa's ever had. And it was terribly sad for me as to what eventually happened and so on. But he, at one stage, he was like the coach when Bob Woolmer was replaced. He was the manager. He was the captain. He was everything. And when he knew that I was going to interview him, he almost preempted the questions I would ask him. Like when, for instance, he bowled Pat Simcox over the wicket to Brian Lara, and in a World Cup match in India, I think it was, and Lara got 100 and we lost in the quarterfinals or whatever. And he knew I was going to say, but surely you should have been bowling Simcox round the wicket to Lara to cramp him up a little bit.
Yeah.
And he started the interview by answering the question because he knew I was going to ask it, you see. So we had an amazing relationship, and sometimes we had a lot of fun in the interviews. And yes, he did end one of the interviews because I paid him a compliment, and he said, Quirky, thank you, you biscuit.
He was a fantastic guy there, Quirky. He really was it.
I see John T. Rhodes' aunt is on board here as well. She pops in every year. She's what a huge privilege to listen to you, Trevor. You were in the commentary box were you in the commentary box with Jack Bannister 80s words live on television?
He ate the newspaper.
Yeah.
Did he? Oh, right.
He ate the newspaper.
Did he?
He did.
It was, it was amazing. I think we were at Newlands, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
And Jack was a wonderful commentator, and we became a tremendously friendly guy. And he was mad about playing golf. And I remember him forcing me and Jackers to get out and play Humewood on about the windiest day I've ever come across in Port Elizabeth, which I never forgave Jack for. But when we were at Newlands, we had a bit of a rain delay, and we'd sort of set things up for when Jack was now going to be in the studio for a while with Martin Locke, because Martin used to have a little studio at the commentary at the grounds, and he did the presentation, and then he used to hand over to us as commentators. And so what we did is we set up a situation where Jack Bannister started eating in the interview situation with Martin Locke, which Martin didn't know quite how to handle in any way. And eventually, Jack started taking the mickey out of poor old Lockie, and Lockie didn't know what was going on. And we were all crying with laughter, of course. And I think to this day, Lockie's never quite forgiven us for that laugh. But we had a lot of fun, and Jack literally was eating his words on that day.
Correct. He ate the newspaper. But now, what I wanted to ask you, sorry.
No, that's fine. No, there was just one more from the comments there. I see last one. Ask him to tell you about the sports quizzes at the Anchor. They tell me it was raucous. Is that
never?
At the Anchor. That was
Ryan Jordan.
Ryan Jordan. You saying how's it?
Sports quizzes at the Anchor. Oh gosh, yes, the Anchor. Yeah. My goodness. Remember the Anchor?
Yes,
certainly do.
Eastbourne Road.
Were you the quizmaster?
A wonderful institution where we used to have a tremendous amount of fun, and over and above the sports quizzes that went on there, we also ended up. Jack has had quite a good voice, actually. He could sing rather well, and he loved to get up when we'd had a few thousand lemonades and sing. And there was that famous singer that Jackers and I got to know so well.
It's not at the Anchor. It was either Danny Fisher or
Tommy Lawson.
Tommy Lawson or
Tommy Lawson.
Tommy Lawson.
Didn't he crash Jackers' BM? I think he crashed Jackers' BM.
Yeah, and so he would get up and Jackers would sing and so on. And then eventually, Jackers persuaded me to get up and sing. Now, it's not quite my forte, but there's sort of only one song I can sing because you can sing it so slowly and poor old, I sang it so slowly that poor old Tommy couldn't actually keep in tune, you know. And I was singing The House of the Rising Sun.
There we go. You would have thought with your days from...
Yes, the quizzes and the parties we had there were unbelievable.
You would have thought for the days of playing the grand piano, you might have had a bit of...
But he gave it up early for
You gave it up too early.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you...
The grand piano.
The piano for wicket keeping.
The piano forte.
The piano I gave up far too early.
I wanted to ask you an opinion now, and you've touched on it a couple of times tonight. And I remember in 1970 watching Mike Proctor, and he was frightening. You know, from, call it 50, 60, 70 meters away. How quick was he really in relation to all the great fast bowlers you've seen in your time?
I think he was deceptively quick, because the reason being that it appeared he bowled off the wrong foot.
Yes.
It didn't quite, but his feet were very close together. And if you ever saw Procky in the shower, you know, his whole right shoulder, right arm and all that was highly developed by comparison to the other side, because it was all in this incredible arm action. And with the appearance to you as a batsman that he's coming, you know, off the wrong foot, that added a yard or two to his pace. And so he was deceptively quick. And also he, as I said earlier, he bowled this very mean bouncer that actually followed you. And in those days, you know, without helmets and things, you weren't brave enough to take him on, mostly in terms of trying to hook him or whatever. You just got out of the way. But he was damn quick. And to me, he's one of the greatest cricketers of all time. I mean, what he did for Gloucestershire, which was called Proctorshire, and what he did for Natal and Rhodesia, and you know, he and for South Africa, he only played those 7 Test matches. But he did wonderfully well in those 7 against the Australians.
41 tests.
I think he might have turned out to be our greatest all-rounder of all time.
Correct.
If he had the opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, 41 wickets in 7 tests. I mean, that's going
unbelievable. I mean, just think of that side in those days, and with the great Graham Pollock and Barry Richards. Barry Richards is the most perfect batsman I think I've ever seen in my life. And I had misfortune to have to keep wicket to him when he was getting 100 against us. I just admired everything he did. He had so much time. He had all the shots. He was so correct. And he only played 4 Test matches. Now, to me, it's an absolute crime that 2 of the greatest players, I think, in the world, between them, only played 11 Test matches. It's terrible.
Very sad. Very sad. But now, Quirky, just digressing, you spoke about the fact that you knew cricket and you knew soccer from having played as an under-18 at Arcadia Shepherds. How many other sports did you commentate on in your career?
Well, you see, in those old days, you didn't have a lot of commentators. There were very few of us, really. And you were made to do virtually everything. And fortunately, I mean, I was a complete sports fanatic. So when I playing decent cricket, I played provincial hockey and squash and all those sort of things. But I loved any sport. And I followed it keenly. And, you know, I ended up then doing 15 Wimbledons. Some for radio, some for television.
Somebody's just said, they loved your Wimbledon.
I remember well.
I mean, I had a wonderful time. Wimbledon was an annual joy for me because it makes all other tennis tournaments pale into insignificance to me.
Correct.
It's a bit like the Masters golf, you know.
It's
something really special. And because I was doing Wimbledon, then we started doing the French Open. So I did about 10 French Opens, 15 Wimbledons. Then I used to stay on and do the British Open golf. So I had this wonderful 6-week escapade every year which was wonderful. And then, I did a lot of rugby. I went on that, which you mentioned, the 1979 South African Barbarians rugby tour, which was still, I think, the best tour that I've ever been on, because it was the first time we had a team of 8 whites, 8 coloureds, and 8 blacks. And the camaraderie and the friendship on that tour was unbelievable.
Fantastic.
All 8 whites became Springboks, and Errol Tobias became...
He was there, correct.
Springbok. And then there were others like Henry Shields and those guys that were playing provincial. They played provincial for Western Province and so on. So it was absolutely the most wonderful tour that I've ever been on. And we had to cope with all the demonstrators and, all that sort of thing. And then shortly after that, I went to South America on the rugby tour to South America. And then after that, the 1981 Flower Bomb tour to New Zealand.
Man, what an experience.
And that was, I always say, it wasn't a rugby tour, it was a sporting crusade. And the saddest thing, of course, was in the final test after we'd won the second test, the series was tied at 1-1. And Ray Mort scored his 3rd try to level the scores at 22-all. Now to come back from, I think we were 16-3 down at half time with the old point scoring system, to level the scores at 22-all against the All Blacks at Auckland Park was incredible, with the distraction of this idiot in the aeroplane flying over and dropping the flower bombs out. It was an amazing business. And I was very privileged that day to have the great, legendary All Black fullback Don Clark as my expert opinion. And when Ray Mort scored the 3rd try in injury time, and Nas Botha placed the ball almost on the touchline, I said to Don, if he doesn't kick this over, it'll be 22-all, 1-all in the series, and that to me would be like a perfect ending to what has been the most extraordinary tour. And Don Clark said, no, if I was in your shoes as a South African or a New Zealand, I would be praying that Nas kicked it over. Well, he missed it by that much. But incredibly, the match went on with this outrageous Welsh referee, Clive Norling. And 9 minutes into extra time, which was unbelievable, he gave a very dubious free kick against us, and then said that our forwards hadn't been retiring the 10 meters. When if you see any replays, they're all retiring. And he awarded the penalty. And Alan Hewson, of course, kicked it over. But Don Clark came in then, and he said that was a totally unjustified penalty. And he said, now, let me say, as a New Zealander, I hope Alan Hewson doesn't kick this over. But, of course, he did. He lost the match 25-22 in the series 2-1. And I remember my final report on that match for Radio Today, because remember, this is now happening at 4 in the morning South African time. I had to do a report for Radio Today. And I went on about this whole tour and what a crusade it had been, and this, how it all ended. And I said, if that's how they want to treat us in New Zealand, then in the words of their own anthem, God defend New Zealand. That's how I ended the report. Well said. And for that, I won an Artie's Award, which was like the South African Oscar, I suppose, which they used to have.
And just as a matter of interest, I know the players were supposedly badly treated there. How were you as a South African treated on that tour? Because that tour remains indelible in my mind. I mean, as you said, the idiot with the flower bomb and the drawing pins apparently, and sleeping in a squash court. How were you treated?
It was the most amazing tour that I've ever been on. I couldn't actually believe what we went through in terms of putting up with protesters, having to sleep on squash room floors, being woken up in the middle of the night and having fire alarms being set off by the protesters and having to rush outside in the bitter cold, just in the guys' underpants virtually. It was absolutely bizarre what went on. Of course, it was an incredible experience and will always go down in my mind as one of the great experiences that I've ever lived through. And as you were saying earlier, I did so many other sports. I went to 4 Olympic Games, and I did world title fights all over the world. And I just, I had the most wonderful, wonderful career as a broadcaster, doing the thing I really loved.
I see Alec Riddle was actually talking about the Comrades as well. I see it right at the bottom there.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, he says I remember doing my first Comrades TV commentary, and Trevor made a point of coming over to me at a hotel near Alveston. Is that...
It's it's sort of halfway between Durban and
Melbourne.
Dear old Alec, I remember so fondly working with him, and Bruce Fordyce, of course, was at his absolute peak in that time and was winning these races. And the other day I was in the Peddlers on the Bend down here in Cape Town, having a lemonade or two, and I heard this guy saying, I'm going for my green number at the Comrades. And I said, really? I said, oh, that's quite fantastic. I said, well done. And he said, have you ever run the Comrades? So I said to him, I've done 17 Comrades. And of course, he looked at me in total disbelief. And then I was going on talking to mates and so on, and I could hear him whispering, to other guys, and eventually he just couldn't contain himself, and he came up to me. He said, "No, Trevor, are you serious? You did 17 Comrades?" And I had to be honest with him, and I said, "Yes, I commentated on 17." And many of them were with Alec, and we always stayed in this hotel, and I think up in Boaters Hill. And we used to have wonderful times up there. And Alec became a very good commentator, not only in terms of anything to do with athletics, but particularly long distance running. He was great. Okay. And
I just spotted now that there's Shane Gerber's given us a question which actually reminded me of another story too. Is to ask Quirky to tell the story about Kalie Knoetze and his visit to a nightclub in Durban, and the bouncer, if you can remember. He told the story at a golf day where he was MC.
Oh gosh, yes. It was wonderful, because what used to happen, and far as you might remember, the old Cattleman restaurant down on the beach in Durban.
What's the guy's name? Alan.
Alan, wonderful fellow,
lovely guy.
And now he's got the butcher's grill or something in
I've seen that.
Quite correct. I'll think of his name.
And anyway, he used to sponsor my team that came from Johannesburg. And what we did is we played against a Natal tennis team, a Natal golf team, a Natal cricket team, a Natal rugby team, all playing golf. Sometimes out at Umhlali and those sort of places, Durban Country Club, Royal Durban. And Kalie Knoetze was part of my team, along with Graham Pollock.
Pagey, I think, might have been there.
Hugh Bladen, Dale Hayes, all those sort of wonderful guys, Dennis Hutchinson. And we had done this dinner where we raised money for paraplegics. Yes. And I used to MC the dinners, and I used to do the auction. And Kalie, after having had a few, decided that the people weren't responding well enough to the auction. So
your mate
came running up onto the stage and grabbed the microphone from me. And he said, "Luister julle, as julle nie begin ordentlik bee nie, you don't start bidding properly. Ek gaan julle moer. Immediately, of course, and he says, because we are raising money for these oaks here. Trevor, what's that word again? I said paraplegics. He said, these oaks, what say you? I said paraplegics. But Kalie could never say that word. They said, you own the wheelchairs. What gaan doen? Well, there was a deathly silence. And the only guys that were laughing were the guys in the wheelchairs.
Yeah.
Anyway, we raised a lot more money. And then we went to a nightclub in Point Road. I think it was called the Red something. Anyway, on leaving there, we were helping one or two of the chaps down the stairs. But Kalie was hiding down the stairs, and at the bottom of the stairs there was this big bouncer. Now, you know, why are you a bouncer? Because I think you like to get involved. And
Yes.
Kalie, of course, was never going to deviate. And so he and the bouncer, their shoulders met. And Kalie turned around to him and said, "Hey, don't push the uncle." And of course, this bouncer immediately pushed him, and Kalie just nailed him. And down he went, absolutely on his back, this huge man, shaking. He was absolutely out, and we slunk out and off and got into the combi. And as we were driving along, I said to Kalie, I said, "Yeah, Kalie, how did you just one punch you murder that guy like that?" Timing, Trevor, timing.
I knew this was going to be a long night. Quirky, whilst on the subject of boxing, that story about that fight that I remember you telling the story many, many years ago. I think it took place in '76 at the Rand Stadium. And we've got a picture of Stan Christodoulou's shirt.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Here we go.
That was between Victor Galendez and Richie Cates. And Stan Christodoulou was the referee. And I mean, there was so much blood, it was quite unbelievable. And in separating them and all that sort of thing, Christodoulou's shirt was absolutely blood red. It was worse than that one on the picture in the end. And I was ringside doing the commentary, and Cates hit Galendez on the eye, and he opened a cut on his eye, above his eye, and then he hit him there again, because obviously the moment they see they've done some sort of damage, they're going to try and, you know, create more damage in the same place. And he hit him again. And it was incredible how the blood spurted out of his eye like in a fountain, and all over my hair and onto my, in those days we used to be beautifully attired, jacket and tied ringside, all over my hair, my face, and onto my jacket and that. And, you know, now you conscious of this, but I couldn't, I couldn't pause for a moment. I just had to continue commentating, wiping this blood and all that sort of thing out of my hair. It was the most awful feeling of somebody else's blood pouring into your hair and all that.
Who actually won that fight? Who actually won that fight, Quirky? Because that's what I couldn't find. Was it Galendez?
Won it in the end,
Oh, you won it?
He was outpointed most of the fight. And Cates did an enormous amount of damage. But in the end, Galendez nailed him. And in the 15th round, in those days, there were 15 rounders, not 12 rounders.
Crazy.
And Quirky, just as a matter of interest, of all the many sporting events and functions and so on that you've been to, what is your sporting highlight?
Well, people often say that to me, and it is actually impossible for me to answer that, really. I mean, I've enjoyed so many great moments. At Wimbledon, doing the McEnroe Borg final, which they went to a tiebreak of 18-16.
I
There was
remember
all
that.
those sort of dramas. There was those title fights. I remember going to Monte Carlo to do Kalie Knoetze fighting Leon Spinks. And we spent 10 days in Monte Carlo in the build-up to all this.
Wow.
And there was old Kalie Knoetze was there as a sparring partner.
Wow.
To Kalie Knoetze. And also staying in the same hotel with us was the man from Stanger, old Tap Tap Magatini, who had done many of these fights, and he had this lethal left hook. And so he was supposed to fight the week after against some Italian. And they, of course, they never arranged sparring partners for him, although they were promised. So Kalie was asked to go and spar with him. But Kalie had to hold his punches, obviously, and and sort of wrestle with him and all that. But Kalie was a heavyweight. Now, I was quite an athlete in those days, still playing sport and so on. And so the manager, who I think was a chap called Govinda of Tap Tap, said to me, won't you come and spar with Tap Tap? I said, you must be joking. One punch from that left hand, I'll be in the promised land. No, he won't be allowed to hit you. And so I eventually agreed, and I got in there, and all my job was to throw as much leather as I could at him for him to, And after 3 minutes, which is the round, the bell rang, and I sat down, and I realized, I couldn't
get up.
Out of here.
And I went into this, and after a minute of the second round, I just stood there. I can't do any more. And that's when I realized just how fit those guys are as boxers. They're not only taking a pounding, but they're giving it at the same time. With all that speed and footwork and everything, it's incredible how fit they have to be. So, and some of the Olympics and the rugby tours I've talked about, some of the cricket tours, they've been great.
That's when Kalie took out Leon Spinks that time. He became world champion, didn't he?
He did. He took him out in, I think, the first round.
That wasn't a world title fight, but Spinks was then, whoever won that fight would then fight for the world title, I think against Dokes.
Michael
Dokes.
Of course, won that fight. And
Dokes is down.
He beat Dokes and won the world title.
Yes, that's quite right.
Because Kalie told me, I played golf with Kalie once, and he told me, no, that Gerrie, he was a soft guy, but if he moor you,
Wait, if he moored you, you stayed moored. But he was, I think the greatest attribute was the fact that he was so fast. As a heavyweight, he was very, very fast and very skillful, and a wonderful athlete. And
you're talking about Kalie now?
He was a great boxer. Talking about if he moored you, I remember, Fires, I don't know if you were at that, I was doing that banquet, benefit banquet.
With Rob Armitage.
Rob Armitage or Kenny Watson. We spoke about that where
Rob.
Kalie got after Kepler because Kepler had hung him on the nose.
Yes, Kepler hit him. Well, we spoke about that before we started, but apparently Kepler and Kalie were having a sparring, and you were the referee, weren't you?
Well, I was MC of the evening, and so I was actually doing it all from the boxing ring. And then part of the evening's entertainment was Kalie fighting in a sort of exhibition match, shall we call it, with Kepler. Now, Kepler fancied himself as a boxer.
He still does.
When he played for Northern Transvaal for a couple of seasons with me, and we had Yogi Ferreira, Anton Ferreira, and Anton Ferreira had been the South African, the Northern Transvaal heavyweight boxing champion, because his father had a gymnasium.
We went to the gym, yeah.
Yogi learned to box properly, and he defended his title, funnily enough, against Kalie Knoetze, who came from Boksburg. And the fight, I think, with the count lasted 13 seconds. And that was of Yogi's Northern Transvaal boxing title. But Yogi always used to bring boxing gloves to the change room when we were playing Currie Cup cricket matches. And Kepler and him used to spar in the change room, at the end of the day's play. And Kepler loved it. And he really fancied himself as a boxer. And if you walk past, you just got a stray clap, as you
What a wonderful man, though.
They were doing this exhibition as part of the benefit. Yeah. And I said to Kalie, you've got to hold your punches now, Kalie, because you can't hit Kepler. I mean, and I said to Kepler, don't be stupid enough to sting Kalie, on the beak. But of course, Kepler really fancied himself. And of course, he nailed Kalie right on the snout with a beautiful straight left. And then I saw this mist come over Kalie. And I realized that here was trouble. And Kalie just waded into Kepler. Kalie, and had to wade, between the two and pull them apart, because he was going to blitz him.
I just wanted to digress for a moment. Prior to the show, we spoke about that particular incident. But the benefit function that I thought you were talking about was the one night at Kenny Watson's benefit, where we were very privileged to be seated at your table, my wife Dot and I, along with Rory Steer and obviously Watto, yourself. And Quirky said to us, I would love to see the sun come up in Port Elizabeth tomorrow. You might remember that, Quirky.
I do indeed, yeah. It was wonderful to be able to help those guys, and those benefit banquets that we used to have. And my goodness, we raised an awful lot of money,
Absolutely.
With the auctions and all that sort of thing. It was just incredible for the money we raised in those days. But of course, it turned into one ginormous party always.
Quirky, old chap, I remember arriving at the function at 6 o'clock on the Friday night, and we got home at 2:30 on the Saturday afternoon. And I think you had to do a gig that evening in, if I remember clearly, Uitenhage.
The thing about it, Fires, is what I always tell people, you've got to practice.
Beautifully said, I agree.
You've got to go to nets every day. And so, not a day goes by that I don't go to nets. And
you are a character.
I could do that.
You are a character.
Trevor, that's been. We're not going to keep you too much longer here, because we've been on for almost 2 hours of chatting. It's been awesome.
Yeah,
there's a couple more.
It's been fantastic.
There's a couple more little questions coming. I see.
Bev.
What's that? Talk about your dismissal handled ball.
Oh my goodness! This is from Bev Openshaw.
Bev Rose.
Bev Rose.
A Zimbo who used to play.
That was playing against Border, and was batting with the dreaded Rodney Ontong.
Oh wow!
And, I was down at the non-striker's end, and Ontong hit the ball straight past me, and I turned around to make my crease in case the bowler got a deflection onto my stumps, and I saw it going straight to the fielder, and I think it was Greg Hayes. And the next thing I heard, this guy standing next to me saying, "Run, you stupid!" And I won't say what he said. And I thought, didn't I? And I took off. Now, you are allowed to run between the fielder and the stumps at which he's throwing at. And certainly you were allowed to in the old days. And I was doing that. And then I looked over my shoulder to see how I was doing in terms of whether I was going to make it or not. And the ball was coming to hit me on the back of my head. So instinctively, I threw my head down like that and went like this with my bat, and it hit the back of my bat and went out to mid-wicket or somewhere. And down on the fine leg boundary, where you could hardly see that anything was happening, but there was this, how's that? You can't do that. It was the dreaded Schmidt was down there.
Samuel.
Who was playing for Border in those days.
Yes.
And so, you know, they all come running, and I think a guy called Nelson was the captain.
Gerald Nelson, Jerry
The
Nelson, quite
umpires
correct.
were Ozzy Schoof and Des Sansom, I think. And Ozzy Schoof said, "Are you appealing?" And Nelson said, "Yeah, well, you know, you can't do that. Can't hit the ball away." And so Ozzy Schoof said, "I agree. You are out." So I said, "Well, how am I out?" He said, "No, obstructing the field. It wasn't handleable. It was obstructing the field."
Okay.
And I said, "Nonsense. I was taking evasive action. And the law says if you're taking evasive action." Well, anyway, then Ozzy consulted with Des Sansom, and then Des Sansom gave me out. And so I had to sprint off to the change room, and I became the first South African cricketer, first-class cricketer, to ever be given out obstructing the field. And if you look in wisdom, I think I was about the 27th at that time.
I forgot
and
about
all the
that.
others in front of me were Pakistanis and people like that. So.
Well, I'll tell you, Trevor, there's a lot of outpouring of love here for you tonight. I'm just going to go through just a few, just to say how's it here. Let's see, Peter Rodseth saying looking brand new. You absolutely are. You don't look a day.
Pete Rodseth, Big Pete, 52.
Yeah,
Good.
52. You look.
Thank you.
You could pass for 52, Trev. Garth Webster says magnificent chat there. Sue Rhodes, that's our Jonty's auntie.
Yes, great question, Sue.
Yes, have you written a book, Trevor?
You haven't?
You know, I have to be honest, you know, I've been prevailed upon by Penguin Books and Jonathan Ball and these publishers for years and years now. And I have to confess that I'm just too damn lazy to do it. And,
Too busy.
So then they've offered me a ghost writer.
Yes,
you know,
I was going to say. I mean,
like the great Colin Bryden, who's a very deep personal friend of mine.
Lovely
Colin
guy.
wrote Jackers' book.
Yes.
And, you know, and so if I did agree to a ghost writer, I would go to Colin. But, you know, I have a way of telling a story and so on.
Yes.
And I don't know that it would entirely work. And also maybe there's so much that one could put in the book. I need to wait for my wife to pass on or something like that before
You need a forklift. You need a forklift to move the book around.
Before you can come clean. Oh, here we go, Brendan Kelly. That's Brendan. He's another commentator. He does a bit of commentary, so he'll take some commentary lessons learned from tonight's show. Brendan, he's brilliant. He knows all the motorsports.
Wonderful, Brendan. All the best.
Yeah, Stuart Pottinger.
Hello, Stewie.
He's from the States. All the way watching. A lot of people from expats watching tonight as well.
Amazing, absolutely amazing.
Fantastic. From the States, Thelma Jean, she's always around. She's a regular. Thank you, Thelma. It's always nice to speak to you as well. I think the Durban side too. And Barbara Manor, soccer legend.
What a lovely lady. Hello, Bobs. Hello, Bobs. You might have commentated on her late husband.
Yeah, that's right. Apple
Very
Manor.
kind of all these wonderful people. And
so there's
you know,
Casey.
One day I will get round to, in my real dotage, when I can't go out to long lunches anymore and I can't play golf, then I might have the time to sit down and write the book and you know, have a bit of fun.
Quirky, just as a matter of interest and just digressing for a moment, I was saying to Gino and Gary earlier, Am I right in saying that Sue was also heavily involved in television?
Oh, yes,
Back in the
Sue.
back in the 80s and maybe 90s?
Yes, she was actually. She was amazingly, when I took over as head of television sport in 1981, when I came back from the Flower Bomb tour, I took over from Kim Shippey, and Sue became my secretary.
Okay.
And she just returned from England, and but she worked for me, and then I promoted her to becoming an archivist, and she was eventually she became the first ever women sports producer.
I remember that. That's what I was saying to you. Yes,
in those days, I was traveling the world, and I had no interest in Sue really. Other than she was a wonderful person and a very good producer and secretary and everything else. And then I don't know, we went to a party one night, and she was there, and
fantastic.
I was with my girlfriend at the time, and Sue and I got dancing, and and then amazingly 4 years later, she actually persuaded me to get married. Because I wasn't keen on getting.
Well, you are a character. I imagine
I was still touring the world, and
I imagine.
And I was like 39 when I got married, which is
she was
late in life. But amazing thing is, literally, I said to her, "Can you handle my lifestyle? Because number one, I'm thirsty. Number two, I travel a hell of a lot." Yes, and if we can deal with all of that, then okay, let's get married. And
I imagine Sue's lying on the couch there.
2 weeks after we got married, I disappeared on a 3-month tour overseas. French Open, Wimbledon, British Open, and then I went to America for a month doing a series called South African Sportsmen Abroad, where I interviewed like Kevin Curran in Austin, Texas.
Yes.
Johan Crick in Naples, Florida. Sid Levy in Detroit, and she put up with all of that and a lot more. And wonderful. What's it now? 35 years we've been together.
35 years. And I imagine she's lying on the couch there, probably thinking, "I've listened to all this shit so many times before."
Oh no, thank you, Trevor.
No, you've been fantastic.
She doesn't want to listen anymore because, amazingly, last night I was doing a show with the great Alan Committee, the comedian.
Oh, Alan,
yes,
Alan well, yes.
That's Gino's department.
Sue came along to this, not because of me, but because of Committee.
And of course, Alan, yes, because he's brilliant.
On all sorts of stories as well. We had a lot of fun. It was a great evening. So she's heard it all before.
Lovely. No, Alan's an absolute legend. I've done work with him as well. We did the Funny Fest together, and he's an absolute legend of a guy.
You still got your glove on?
I kept my glove on the whole time, and my hat.
We've lost Quirky, have we not?
We might have.
Have we lost Quirky?
No, he's still there.
Replace the basher with a helmet.
Well, Duncan Phillips here said you sconned him without a helmet once. It's still tender, he says. There we go, Duncan. He says, great show, brilliant stories. My head's 38 still. Oh, it's you. It was you. It was you that sconned him.
No, I've never sconned anybody.
No, thank you, Trevor.
I remember Dunks. Hello, Dunks.
Trevor, thank you so much for coming on board tonight. It's been fantastic. 2 hours of your time. We really appreciate it, man.
I would like to say thank you as well, Quirky. It's an honor and a privilege. And always wonderful to see you now.
Absolute pleasure, guys. The time is very fast, I must admit.
Good.
We should have an episode 2 with you.
Little,
Excellent.
Quirky.
Please send your address. We're going to send you a case of Fitch and Leeds as well to keep you some lemonade. We'll send you some lemonade.
Has Sue been sliding those Bacardis in there? How have you got the Bacardis there?
No, she's been very good. She's been very good.
Give her our love and tell her thank you.
Having a little scotch or two.
Oh, good. Oh,
okay, and
lovely.
then just as a matter of interest, I'm not sure if Gwen has spoken to you and Bossy. Paige is trying to put this show together for May, June with a Mean Machine, you guys, the Western Province guys and the EP guys.
Lovely.
So if you don't mind, when
Breaking
next you
up
speak
fires,
to Gwen,
but I think what you're talking about is that the Mean Machine wants to come and have a reunion, and I believe it's in Port Elizabeth. And
with
there'll
you
be
guys.
a golf
That's
day
it.
and a dinner and all that.
And you're on the ball.
Look
We look
forward
forward
to
to
it.
seeing you. We look forward
Thank
to
you.
seeing you.
Trevor,
Wonderful.
thank you for
Thanks
coming
very
on.
much.
Thank you for a lovely evening.
Lovely. Cheers.
Cheers, Quirky.
Yes, Quirky.
Thank
Ciao.
you very much for inviting me.
Pleasure.
Thank you for lovely stories.
What a fantastic
Lovely.
evening. It's been beautiful. Thank you. And thank you to
Lovely.
our sponsors, Spa and Amobia for our internet.
I look
of
forward to
course.
seeing you in May, June.
Yeah, yo. And Fitch and Leeds too for our prizes. We've got one more prize to give away. Let's pull the trigger. We're going to pull the trigger and see who's online, who's going to win the prize. Tonight, any one of you that's online at the moment can win it. So we're waiting.
Etienne Schmidt.
No, yo,
Smitty was on there.
They're
Did you
all
see
on.
Smitty? Smitty!
Keith
Keith,
Keith, fantastic. You won it, buddy. You got it. And Trevor will send you one as well. Thank you so much. And like I said, thank you to our sponsor, Spa and Fitch and Leeds, as well as Amobia. And we'll see you next Tuesday.
and an episode 2 with you, Quirky.
We'll do one for sure. Cheers, guys.
Love you lots. Well done. Thank you, Quirky.
Relax, sit down. Coming out of PE town. One drink, find a shot. Never mind your liver, get to Gino's spot. Gino's spot. Get to Gino's spot.